Is anything in this life actually free, or do we pay for it in some way, shape, or form? Is the First Amendment right actually give us the right to say and speak our mind openly whenever we want to and wherever we want to? Our group believes that we cannot. The first argument that we bring up is that, in the sense of freedom of speech, you can say what you want to say when you want to say it, but you will have to be held responsible for what you say and be able to take the criticism or whatever comes next. In the article Free Speech and the Paradox of Tolerance by Julia Saranto, she states that we by no means are entitled to free speech without criticism or consequences. So you can go around saying what you want whenever you want, but that doesn't mean that people can't use their right of freedom of speech to argue against you or criticize or have to say something negative about you what you say. So is that really freedom of speech if you are being criticized or people are challenging what you have to say? In a sense, yes, but people get this judgment of free speech that I could say this because that's what my First Amendment right lets me do, which is not correct. Because in certain places, like private property, like a school, they own it so they can tolerate what they want to tolerate. A good example would be there's a famous YouTuber by the name of Danny Duncan. He sells merchandise, and on the merchandise, it prints and reads "Virginity Rocks." And having such a statement on your shirt is your right to your First Amendment of freedom of speech. You publicly displayed what you want. If you're wearing something, you're promoting it. That's what you like. But kids have got in trouble for going to school wearing his shirts stating virginity rocks, and people have been suspended and or even expelled for just wearing a shirt that says virginity rocks. And that seems to be contradicting to our First Amendment right, because that is the freedom of speech. But since on school grounds, which is private property, they can tolerate or tell you to take your shirt off or change your shirt, and if you do not, they will have the right to send you away or suspend you. This also works for public speakers. If you are giving a speech for a company or if you are promoting something, if you were speaking on their grounds, they have the right to restrict what you say or they tell you what you can say, and that does not embellish the First Amendment to say what you want to say it when you want to say it.
Free speech is not free. With the help of Logan, we have established that humans have responsibilities for their own actions and even as far as their own existence. There have been many philosophers who have questioned this responsibility of where it goes and how far. In Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, a student of Plato, there are three established disciplines to the human condition: the discipline of perception, the discipline of will, and the discipline of action. These are all responsibilities a human must bear. A section of the book states human society is an organism, like an individual human body or a tree. But the trunk of the tree is not to be confused with the leaves, or the hands and feet with the head. Our duty to act justly does not mean that we must treat others as our equals, it means that we must treat them as they deserve. And that kind of follows what I'm going to say next about how the line that needs to be drawn between free speech and hate speech needs to be drawn from within oneself and how one needs to express their version of the truth. And Dr. Jordan Peterson states in his book, 12 Rules for Life, that it is crucial to speak out on independent thoughts. Morally, we as humans need to speak out on our ideas and thoughts despite facing controversy to establish social and civil justice. Regardless if someone sees it as hate speech or not, the truth must be clearly represented, like I said just a second ago. Um, the freedom to identity and judgment also falls into free speech. And then when I want to backtrack from Logan's example from Danny Duncan is that uh, students were expelled for wearing Virginia Rocks shirts, which is rightfully just because based on the social standing on that, it represents a completely different thing, even though it's kind of not. And then Logan also mentioned the workplace and how once you get hired from a job, wherever you go in public, it kind of represents that company as well because they hired you and they want you to represent their company as well in a positive way. So uh, I think this all can connect back to the First Amendment and what is established as free speech. There is never an instance in which the same action bears the same responsibility as we see in court cases, each one varies, and it doesn't necessarily change the Constitution entirely. So, and life continuously moves forward, and there's always learning to get from the past. Since the world is continuously changing, the responsibility falls on humans to be present and take into account the past in order to execute consequences and respond appropriately. If I were to say gender identity is wrong and inappropriate, I would be scrutinized based on the time period, historic movements, and awareness of human psychology that proves that um, our nature isn't really strictly one or the other. But if I were to go to the Roman time period and say that a man is primarily responsible for hunting and caring for the women in society, I would just be an average person. So, um, the solution now to free speech and hate speech debate is as a society, what do we label it as? Morally correct or not? So, and then we are discovering now that polarization is a huge trend more than ever. And my my co-student um, Yesenia will now talk about the criticism of Serrano's speech and hate speech debate.